What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily. So if you had told me a few months ago that Apple was actually going to release the iPhone 13 mini, I probably wouldn't have believed you. Seemingly plagued by poor sales compared to the rest of the lineup and battery issues for a lot of folks, the 12 mini just didn't really feel like the usual uber popular new iPhone. So when Apple announced this new 13 mini alongside the rest of the new iPhones, I was surprised to say the least. I guess the reports of its death were greatly exaggerated. But aside from its unexpected release, I'm also surprised, after using this phone for the last month, by how much better it is compared to the 12 mini. This is most definitely an S year for the iPhone. The changes and improvements are objectively minimal, but with the iPhone 13 mini in particular, those few new upgrades really do make a difference. The things Apple focused on are probably three of the most important smartphone characteristics overall: the display, the battery life, and the camera. For this 13 mini, obviously, better battery life was absolutely necessary. But to be totally honest, if I had to pick just one of those as reason enough to consider this phone, it would actually be the camera. I'll of course get into all that stuff in just a bit, and feel free to scrub through the video to find what you are interested in. But to start off, I still think the primary reason people might consider this mini iPhone is because of its form factor. It's a departure from the usual 6+ inch iPhones that we've had for years and years now, and while I know most people are used to and probably enjoy a bigger phone with a bigger screen, something like this still has its advantages. Obviously, it's very comfortable to hold, and at this size, I think just about everyone would be able to use it with one hand or one thumb. For me, coming from a larger device, this was actually a nice change, and you don't really realize how much more compact the mini is until you have it side by side to the standard iPhone 13. It really is significant enough to make a difference. Now, because the fit and feel and form factor is also nice, I think adding some regular bulky case on the 13 mini kind of takes away from that, which is why I'd recommend getting a super slim case from the folks at PHNX, who are kind enough to also sponsor this video. PHNX makes cases for minimalists, those of us who still want some protection but who don't want the phone to be shrouded in a thick hunk of rubber. PHNX cases are sleek and add no extra bulk at all. You won't even notice it on the phone until you drop it and breathe a sigh of relief knowing that it did its job. They're precision cut to give you that perfect fit around the corners, edges, cutouts, and buttons, and you've even got a little extra protection around the camera lenses and along the screen, a sort of raised edge that acts like a protective bumper. PHNX cases come in frosted white and black, and matte black too, for a nice stealthy look. And I think they're the perfect complement for the 13 mini, or any iPhone really, if you're looking for a slim, minimal case that still offers proper protection. Check out PHNX cases at the link down below. There's a 20% off coupon too for you to use if you're interested. And thanks so much again to PHNX for sponsoring this video. So we know the iPhone 13 mini is nice to hold and have in the hand, but there's also the user experience factor that comes into play when you start shrinking the screen, tapping and touching and typing and just viewing content in day-to-day use. The 5.4-inch display is generally good for all that. Apple still refuses to give up that notch, and while yes, it's technically smaller this year, on the mini it's a particularly pronounced feature. But overall, watching movies or videos on this thing, or even playing games, is all a positive experience. As small as this phone feels nowadays, smartphones used to be even tinier than this, so comparatively, you've got plenty of screen real estate still, and it's not really like your fingers are fighting for space, at least in my experience. You're not shown any less on screen, there's no disadvantages obviously, it's all the same experience, just shrunk down to a more manageable size. And all in all, I really do think the mini form factor is a big plus for this phone. And by the way, the whole rest of the hardware is very much the premium experience you'd expect. Apple didn't change the design or the materials. You probably couldn't even pick this new phone out of a lineup of 12 minis, unless you knew to look for the random repositioning of the camera lenses. But beyond that, it's the same glass and aluminum material that's been offered for years. And that's great. Even though this phone is the least expensive iPhone, there's no compromises. And yes, I do realize that means it's still not cheap, so a premium fit and finish is a must. Let's dive into the three actual upgrades this phone did receive now. The first one is minor, but it's something I noticed. The screen on the 13 mini is brighter, but unfortunately, that is the only thing that's changed. It's not any sharper, there's no ProMotion like on the 13 Pros, but in my experience, the extra 200 or so nits of potential brightness, a 20 some odd % increase, has yielded a better viewing experience, both indoors and especially outside. And I actually think with a smaller display, boosting the brightness is particularly beneficial for this phone. All the iPhone 13s get brighter screens, but with the mini being smaller, it makes it a bit easier to see in direct sunlight with a brighter display. Overall, the viewing experience is solid. Apple's Super Retina XDR OLED panel is bold and colorful. The 2340 by 1080 resolution on a screen this size makes some sense. You get 476 pixels per inch crammed in there. It's the highest pixel density in the iPhone lineup actually, and no matter what it is you're watching, your content is going to look good. The second big improvement to the iPhone 13 mini is battery life. Again, all the new iPhone 13s see improvements here, but with this phone, it's particularly impactful and was a must-have. I think it's a result of a couple of things. First, the battery size itself is technically slightly larger. 2438 milliamps up from 2227 on last year's device. That 10% increase doesn't tell the whole story though. Apple claims the 13 mini can last 90 more minutes during the day compared to the 12 mini, and I think the new A15 Bionic chipset and well-optimized iOS 15 update all help pump that number up too. In real-world use over a normal day, my 13 mini usually sits at around 30% left by the nighttime, and while the regular iPhone 13 has 40 or 45% left by comparison usually, I still think that's a solid showing for the mini. You could potentially push this phone beyond 10 hours of screen on time if you needed to, but I think it's important to understand that even with the improvements over last year, the 13 mini will still yield you the worst battery life out of the entire iPhone lineup. I'll also say this too, everyone's usage varies significantly. And when I used the 12 mini last year, I just didn't really have much concern when it came to longevity. Battery issues weren't what I experienced, but I know some people were unhappy, and I appreciate Apple addressing it. The 13 mini certainly isn't a powerhouse of a device made for the long haul like the 13 Pro Max is, but I do think for a vast majority of people, it's going to be a solid phone for normal daily use, and the improvements over last year with longevity are noticeable for sure. And just to touch on performance here too, I mentioned already the new A15 Bionic processor inside. It's, of course, the fastest and most powerful and most advanced whatever inside an iPhone. We know that, but year over year, the speed and performance boost just isn't that significant anymore. So it's not like this phone feels that much faster or is that much more powerful than the 12 mini, or even an iPhone 11 for that matter. If you're coming from like an iPhone 10 or 10s or 10R or something much older than that, then yeah, it's definitely a huge speed boost. But in my mind, while Apple, I'm sure, will continue to update the chipset, the year-over-year difference is just not a factor. Finally, if you're looking for one specific reason to buy the 13 mini besides its size, I think it would have to be the camera capabilities. Apple very generously offers nearly the same camera setup across the entire iPhone 13 lineup. You still get a bit more in going with 13 Pros, of course, but you don't really get anything less with the Mini. Generally speaking, for point-and-shoot shots, for videos, for more complex scenes, even for professionals, the 13 Mini just offers a surprisingly incredible value with its camera setup when you really break it down. And after shooting probably 300 plus pictures and videos with this phone, I've been more than happy with everything I saw. Hardware-wise, the specs indicate no real changes versus last year. The dual lens setup is a similar 12 megapixel main lens and 12 megapixel ultra wide. The selfie camera also seems to be the same too. But when you start taking some real-world pictures and videos, I think you'll very quickly notice a decent improvement over last year. Capability-wise, there's some new stuff like the cinematic mode, which is sort of like portrait for video. It's okay, but not really something I use since I don't tend to film people, and I think that's where it's most useful. There's that new profiles option that lets you choose custom preset exposure, white balance, and other elements for your pictures. That's nice if you're going for a certain look, but again, not something that's really necessary. Most everything else inside the app is the same, so you won't see any more big changes there. But when you start taking pictures with this thing, really what stands out most to me is just how much brighter and more detailed every shot tends to be. Apple, I think, focused a lot to ensure that every picture captures more light So whether that be in ideal conditions or low light and night mode, you're going to see a brighter, more pleasing looking image. Beyond that, I noticed that the 13 mini can retain quite a bit more detail, which is great. You can adjust the color and brightness and overall look of a shot after the fact, but you can't do much about lost detail. Low light and night mode especially look really good. Not only does the iPhone tend to bring out a lot of the things that you sometimes don't even see with your eye, but the quality is better too. It's less noisy, less blurry. It's still not perfect. You can absolutely challenge this phone. And there are plenty of instances still where not everything is shown. Dark shadows are there, black spots are plentiful, but objectively, the 13 mini's low light performance is probably what's most improved. I also found the wide angle lens to be quite consistent as well, and that too sees a big improvement with low light shots. I know I actually use the wide angle quite a lot, and having a consistent looking image versus the main lens is pretty important to me. Now, in coming from the 13 Pro, I did kind of miss some elements like macro. The 13 mini, like most other iPhones of the past, isn't really great for particularly close-up shots, and the zoom is fine, but it's all digital, so you lose more and more detail the more you zoom in. Those are the main limitations in going with the 13 mini over the 13 Pro, but I think most people just pull their phone out of their pocket, snap a quick picture or two, and they're done. And if that's the case, this phone is going to produce really stellar shots under most conditions. Again, if you want to take things a step further, you totally can. There's HDR and Dolby Vision support, shooting up to 4K 60. It's a really well-rounded setup with plenty of capabilities and enough potential to make the most of it all, regardless of this phone not being the Pro. But I think what all is still offered here is just a really solid setup, all things considered. So just to finish things off here, the iPhone 13 mini is an unexpected continuation of an iPhone that appeared to be the only one ever that wasn't an overwhelming success. The 12 mini was met by a ton of fanfare at first, that I guess very quickly died out and was suddenly embraced by criticism, rumors, and a premature death certificate. But I guess Apple still feels there's a market for a mini iPhone, and I think there is too. If you're coming from an older device, this 13 mini is going to be a big upgrade for you, especially if you've been wanting to ditch the big, bulky 6-inch smartphones. And while this phone is only an incremental upgrade over last year's 12 mini, the handful of changes this phone did receive are probably felt a lot more here than on the other iPhone 13s. And that, I think, makes this phone overall a really enticing buy. While the 12 mini was sort of a trial period, I guess, the 13 mini, I think, is going to be a make it or break it kind of product that winds up influencing Apple to either keep it or abandon it in the coming years. I personally hope they continue to offer it. It's a crazy good value. It's still very unique, and I definitely enjoy using it. So there you go. Those are all my thoughts on the new iPhone 13 mini. What do you guys think? Is the 13 mini worth it? Are you upgrading from the 12 mini or maybe something else? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.